Good morning. Today I'm going to try to give a quick overview of how to move from last class's assignment where we annotated the DBQ and now we're moving towards organizing for an essay. Well, let's imagine that this is the DBQ that you annotated last time, and you'll see that I have society highlighted in blue and politics in green, and I went through hypothetically, and I highlighted all of the politics green, and let's imagine there are many down here that are highlighted in blue that refer to society. And for homework, you were to go through the documents, the Modern America pieces, and to look for things that you thought were social themes or political themes. So, for instance, if Millionaires were a political party, that party would make up roughly 3% of American families, but it'd have a supermajority in the Senate, majority in the House, 222, and a man in the White House. Well, that's really both, of course. It's talking about politics and society, because it's talking about social class. But its emphasis seems to be on the political party, so I'm going to highlight that in green. And let's imagine that you did your homework last night and it's complete, and you've gone through and you've highlighted all these things. And for instance, right here in Doc 3, that's a chart. There's no real text to highlight, but perhaps you have highlighted this and made a comment in the side describing what you're seeing here. Okay? And you've gone through and you did your homework well, and now you have all 10 of these documents well highlighted, well annotated. And you are now ready to start thinking about organizing your essay. Well, the next place you would go, and you already did this, the other day in class we went to the materials folder, we clicked down here on the student folder, and inside the student folder, in the essay help, there's something called an Essay 1 organizer. That organizer looks like this. And what you can do today, now that you have your DBQ fully annotated, and if you are not complete with that, you want to finish that. You want to go through the docs and annotate for social and political themes. But if you are through with that and you finish the homework, your next step is right here. And this is the thinking that we have to do to organize this essay. You'll see this organizer. It's laid out. It says Pericles and Old Oligarch, arguments for, and you're putting a little summary down in these blocks. And support, and they go across 1, 2, 3. Well, what you're going to want to do is look back at what you highlighted and think to yourself, first off, who do you agree with? I mean, you're writing a paper here. Which perspective, it's asking a question, which perspective do you see more of? So you have to think, do you agree that our country today, modern America, is more like what Pericles would have predicted, that democracy has made us strong, that some of the things that you've highlighted and isolated, when you read those, does that sound like what modern America is today? Does it describe how we function? Has democracy made us strong? Or when you look at the documents, was the old oligarch right? Is democracy, made us weaker? Are we weaker because we have so much support for the rabble, that we're not led by the best, that we don't encourage the best to lead us. And so when you look at these two columns and what you've highlighted, you have to think first what you agree with. Once you know who you agree with, you would come back here, and let's say we agree with Pericles. I'm going to take Old Oligarch right out. I would. I could cross him right out. And now I know that my argument for is in agreement with Pericles. My argument for is in agreement with Pericles, and so I can start to fill in this chart. And I think, okay, when I look down this chart, what are Pericles' main points? What are his best points? What's the summary of his best points? Well, he says a lot, for instance, about how, for instance, in 5 and 6, 6, he's talking about how the democratic man is excellent. Man in a democracy is excellent and very capable. Talks here about poverty, and he talks in 2 and 4 about poverty. So there's something here about poverty not being a punishment in a democracy. That in a democracy you can rise above poverty. So I'm going to say here, argument 4. I'm going to say in a democracy, a person can raise themselves poverty. Okay. Through work and talent. I think that pretty fairly summarizes what Pericles says in Docs 2 and 4. What I would now go do is I would look down in the documents, and I'm looking for items that support this in the documents. So I come back, I scroll down, and I would be looking for items in this in these docs that say, okay, show people rising out of poverty, show people through hard work getting ahead, and lo and behold, per capita income in the United States, 1870 to 2000. What that phrase means, but it means per person, basically the income we have per person. And what we see is that from 1870, the year 1870, all the way up to 2000, a pretty steady increase. This is the Great Depression. But we see we rebound from that, and we're pretty, that's a pretty obvious upward tick. And so what that shows us is that in our democracy, individuals have, on average, steadily gained more income, gained more money. So document 3 becomes a really great piece of support. Document 3 becomes a great piece of support for this argument of Pericles. And why? Well, if I'd gone through and made a comment on document 3, it might have said over here, seems like incomes are rising over time in America. That's the very sort of thing right here. Support for document 3. Chart shows income rising over time in U.S. Okay. And my typing will have to rise above. But that would be an example of how you start to fill in this chart. You find a piece of the document, a piece of support that backs up this argument of Pericles'. Pericles says that you can rise out of poverty in democracy, and there I found a piece of support in the docs that shows that in modern America, people do have shown an ability to rise up, have rising incomes. I would look for more support. I would look for another document that supports this point. If I could find it, and you may not always, but I would try to find three pieces of support out of the docs that support this point of Pericles. After that, I'd go back, I'd look at my Pericles again, and I'd look again, okay, it's another social or political thing he talks about. Well, he says, our laws, our constitution, our government favors the many instead of the few, that laws afford equal justice to all. So I might say here that one of Pericles' arguments is that in a democracy there is equal justice before the law. And if that's my second point, I would start to dive into the docs and find a piece of support for that. And for instance, right here, document 2 from the United States Constitution says all people have a right to speedy public trial, an impartial jury. These seem to suggest that there will be equality before the law, right? An impartial jury in a speedy trial. So I might pull a quote from the Constitution. Perhaps I would pull this quote. Right to there. Perhaps I would pull that quote, and maybe I'd put that quote right here. And I would paste that right in. And again, you want at least 2, and ideally you want 3 pieces of support for everything you're agreeing with about Pericles or the old oligarch as you fill this chart out. When you get these 3 filled out, again, we're imagining here that I'm in support of Pericles' position. Well, the argument against, this would be the old oligarch. And what's his best argument? When I look at the material and I think, okay, what's his best point? And I scroll back up here. Well, perhaps one of his best points is maybe this sums up his best point, which is, well, even if you call it a democracy, whatever you call it, the best people, the most educated, they will take control now that making the rules anyway. So maybe that's his best point, that elites will rule anyway, something like that. And that kind of sums up one of his positions, that the better class of people will always rise to the top and take over. And so we look and we would find a piece of support in the modern docs, a piece of support here from modern America. Maybe not hard to find. Maybe we could go right back up here to this document 1 actually, and that would be a great piece of support for that. After you find the best piece of support for your opponent, in this case the old oligarch, his best argument, you then are going to find 2 pieces from the docs that are rebuttals to that disagree with that. And what you're setting up here is a paragraph. You will have written this paragraph. This row right here will be one whole paragraph. This one will be a whole paragraph. And this one would be a whole paragraph. So you would have 3 paragraphs that will be your argument of agreement with one of these 2 men. In our example here, Pericles. It'd be 3 body paragraphs that would give great reasons why you agree with Pericles, that Pericles was right. Then you would add 1 paragraph where you would say, well, the old oligarch, he has a point that seems really good. And when he says elites will rule it anyway. And you would give 1 piece of support, right? You don't want to pretend that your opponent is just completely wrong on everything. You want to give 1 piece of support. Why does a reasonable person maybe look at this data and think the old oligarch is right? 1 piece of support. And then within that same paragraph, though, you will rebut that argument. You will basically argue against it. You will show that while that's his best argument and there is some support, in fact there's more evidence that tilts it the other way. And that will be that 4th body paragraph right here. Well, you want to organize, fill in this chart, and as I've just said, this is going to organize your essay. This is basically becomes an outline where your arguments for, these are something like your topic sentences. And then in here, how you work with the documents, this becomes your interior, your details of support. When you have done all those things, the last thing you'll need to think of is you'll look at what you have and you'll think about starting to write your thesis. And I'm going to pause here in this video because I want to keep this as short as possible and just let this help you fill in your charts. And this is what we are doing today. You want to fill in your chart, and ideally you would move on and start thinking about what your thesis is after you've filled in your chart. Thank you.